Turn with me, if you will. No, that's loud. To John chapter 18. I like it. I like it loud. Just try to go to sleep. Just try. It's always good to be here. I just can't get Chad to stay when I come to preach. I'm going to sneak in one Sunday and make him let me preach, just so he'll be here. I'd miss him when he's not here. I like Chad. I think you got a good man, and I think you've been good to him, and I think he's been good for you. So I pray that you have years and years to go. Jesus and his encounter with Pilate. Interesting study. I ask you to turn in your Bible to John 18 because this is a Bible study. And I want to talk to you about what the Bible says. When you come to me and you ask me a question, all I have to offer you is what this says. I don't have any startlingly new things to tell you about Pilate. But I do have some observations I want to make based on what John recorded a long time ago. Sometimes we think we know a lot about people and instances in the Bible, and I heard a saying a long time ago that the more familiar the passage, the more closely you need to study it, because you take it for granted. When I think it was Brother Freed, it may have been Brother Hardiman, but when one of them was in his upper 80s and he had retired to his little house there in Henderson, where the college is, one day he was sitting on his front porch reading his Bible, and a freshman Bible student walked down the sidewalk and saw him. So he just couldn't pass up the opportunity to walk up the sidewalk, and he said, brother, whatever your name is, Freed or Hardiman, what are you studying? And he said, I'm studying baptism. And this young know-it-all preacher, like all young preachers are, said, why are you studying baptism? And he said, in case I missed something. That's a Bible student. He had been studying it his whole life. He had preached it for 70 years. But just in case I missed something, I want to keep studying. So even though you've heard of Pilate, you've read about and studied the crucifixion many times probably, let's study it again in case we've missed something. Start reading with me in John 18, beginning at verse 28. I'm going to read a lot, so if you got a Bible, turn to this with me, because we're going to go all the way to 1916. Ready? Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas, the high priest, to the praetorium, and it was early morning. But they themselves did not go into the praetorium lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Pilate then went out to them and said, what accusation do you bring against this man? They answered and said to him, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. Then Pilate said to them, you take him and judge him according to your law. Therefore the Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus and said to him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me? Pilate answered him, I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I'm a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews, and he said to them, "I find no fault in him at all. But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" Then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. Pilate then went out again and said to them, "Behold, I'm bringing him out to you that you may know that I find no fault in him." And Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." Therefore, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify him, crucify him." Pilate said to them, "You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again to the praetorium and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Then Pilate said to him, Are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have power to crucify you and power to release you?" Jesus answered, "You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given you from above. Therefore, the one who delivered me to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, "If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar." When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. And he said to the Jews, "Behold your king." But they cried, away with him, crucify him." Pilate said, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar." Then he delivered him to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. That is the encounter between Jesus and Pontius Pilate. Pontius identifies him as one of the Pontii, Pontii. They were the clan that they were the last real threat to the Roman Empire when it was starting. They were their strongest enemies, but the Romans finally defeated them. And after they defeated them, they incorporated them into the empire, but they were always looked down on because they were their last enemies. And Pilate was part of that group. Now, Roman society was divided into 3 levels. You had the patricians on the top, where you had the nobility and the leaders. You had the equestrians in the middle class that was always trying to climb the ladder to become a patrician. And then you had the plebeians and the lower level that included the slaves and workers. Now, Pilate was an equestrian. He was in the middle. And he was a soldier, and he was a politician. And in order to justify, maybe, vindicate, may be a better word, his family name of the Pontius, he wanted to climb up to the patrician level. So he was always looking for an opportunity. So he was a soldier, he was a politician, and philosophically, most of the equestrians, since they hated their position stuck in the middle, and they were willing to do anything to get out of the middle class, most of them were skeptics. They didn't really stand for anything. They would do whatever they needed to do to climb the ladder, which is going to come up after a while when he asked Jesus, what's truth? I don't live by truth. Now, in this encounter, there are several things that we're going to see from this man. There are times I'm tempted to feel sorry for Pilate. You ever feel that way? It's like he's stuck in the middle. But this man that we know so little of was a ruthless military leader. You read in Luke 13:1 about the Galileans whose blood Pilate mingled with their sacrifices. See, when Pilate first got to town, he decided that he needed to come in with a bang. And he needed to establish himself as a very strong leader. And these Galileans up there in the northern part of the Bible lands, up near the Sea of Galilee, as you know, there was a little uprising up in that area. And to show them that he was nobody to mess with on a worship day when they're all at the tabernacle or at the synagogue in Galilee, he sent his troops in. And they slaughtered them. Not only while they were worshiping, but in the place of worship and at the very altar on which they were offering their sacrifices. And for a Gentile to do that just canceled out your sacrifices. So, I wonder how much we know. History tells us that a few decades later, under the reign of Caligula, Pilate will commit suicide. So he didn't have a happy life. Back to John 18:28. Let's look at it. They took Jesus from Caiaphas, the high priest, to the praetorium, the office of the governor, Pilate. It was early in the morning, somewhere around 6 o'clock in the morning. But they didn't go in the praetorium lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Now see, they are religious guys. This mob that has formed, this group that is out for the purpose, which we're going to see in just a moment, of killing this man, no matter what he says, no matter what anybody else says. Well, they want to be able to go to church. You know. They don't want to get themselves into a situation where they can't go to worship. No wonder Jesus laid their ears back in Matthew 23 and talked about what hypocrites they were. But here's what we're going to do. If you want to really get a handle on the encounter of Pilate with Jesus, you trace his movements through this encounter. Because you can watch him. And he goes here, and then he goes there, and then he goes here, and then he goes there, and then he goes back here, and he goes back there. So let's go back and retrace his steps. First, he goes to the accusers of Jesus, as we noticed, as we read. And he went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" By stating that, by saying those words, that initiates the trial of Jesus. That's, all rise, when a judge comes into the room or something like that in one of our courtrooms. This is the indication that a trial is beginning. Tell me what you've got this man before me for. And they said, well, if he were not an evildoer, if he weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have brought him to you. Smart Alex. So Pilate said to them, well, you take him then, see? You take him and judge him according to your law. But now they show their cards. Okay? The trial has just begun. Now they did not live under the same laws that we do, but they were similar. And in our court system, if things work right, you are presumed innocent until you are proven guilty. It's not the way they were doing it with Jesus. They already had him in their minds, and they were trying to influence Pilate. They already had him tried and convicted. All they needed was to kill him. Because they said, well, it's not lawful for us to put anyone to death. Now, back when talking to Nicodemus in John chapter 3, Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. Jesus knew every day of his ministry what was coming. He's not surprised to be here before Pilate. This is all part of the plan. But it wasn't easy, because last night he sweat blood. In the garden, according to Luke, Dr. Luke, as he was praying to God in the garden, he sweat blood. Do you realize he's not the only person to ever sweat blood? I used to think, wow, that's the only time that's ever happened. No, that's not real uncommon. But you have to be really worked up. You have to be so distraught that your blood pressure goes through the roof, the capillaries in your sweat glands rupture, and literal blood comes out of your sweat glands. Well, he knew he was coming out of the grave. He knew this was going to be temporary. He wasn't scared to die. I know plain old people like you and me who have died without a wink. What he was worked up about was the cross. What he was scared of, if you will, some people get offended at that, but what made him sweat blood was the prospect of bearing the guilt of sin for 3 hours on the cross, bearing the separation from God that the guilt of the sins of the world would bring him for 3 hours. And we play with an eternity separated from God and don't take it seriously. Verse 33. After he talks to Jesus' accusers, he moves and he goes to hear what Jesus has to say. So Pilate entered the praetorium, called Jesus, said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" I don't know if that's sarcasm or if he's asking a serious question. But Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this? Or did others tell you? Do you know something personally, or do you have witnesses that can back up what you said?" He said, "Am I a Jew? When your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me, what have you done?" Now, Jesus does not hesitate to admit that he has a kingdom. When Jesus started preaching, if you go back to Mark chapter 1, right after Jesus' baptism, it said he went about preaching the kingdom, the good news, the gospel of the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God. The kingdom is near. Jesus never denied that he was a king or that he had a kingdom. They just didn't understand the nature of his kingdom. He said, my kingdom is not of this world. My servants would fight. See, if it were, so that I wouldn't be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. So he said to him, so are you a king? Are you a king? Now watch this. He said, yeah. This is the reason I was born, but not only that. This is the reason I came into this world. Have you ever caught that? It's one thing to say, this is the reason I was born. We're all born. But to say, this is the reason for which I am come into this world, implies that he was before he came here. See? If I understand, now say I don't know much and I don't understand everything about life and how God does what he does. But if I understand the little bit that seems to be hinted at in the Bible, before I was born in the Talladega Hospital, October 23rd, 1960, I had not been anywhere else. You know. Well, wait a minute. I was conceived 9 months before that. So let me go back 9 months. So when I was conceived by my parents, God put a soul in me, and that's where I started. So I was born. I didn't come into the world. This is where I started. Now, I'll never die. See? Jeff will never die. I'm not talking about my body. This is my house. You've never seen Jeff. I've never seen Jeff. But Jeff, the real me, will never die. But I had a starting point, whatever 9 months before October 23rd, 1960 was. See? Jesus goes all the way back and all the way forward. And he says, you know what? I was around a long time before we ever thought about you, buddy. And the whole reason I came down here and agreed to be born. See, I didn't have any choice. You didn't have any choice about being born. But the only reason Jesus agreed to be born was so that he could be the king. So now Pilate, he's pretty much made up his mind. And so he goes back out to declare the innocence of Jesus. He says, when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews. Well, what is truth? I skipped that part. But when he said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. Now, he's the judge. If things were as they should be, case closed, let the man go. Well, see, it wasn't supposed to work that way, though, was it? It's a good thing for me and you that Pilate didn't dismiss the case. He wasn't supposed to get off. But Pilate tried. See, that's why I say that for some reason, I kind of feel sorry for him at times. I don't know if you've ever read it, but there's a novel, a historical novel, Pontius Pilate, by a man named Paul Meyer. Very interesting read, takes a different slant. Not biblical, it's written by this man, but it's very interesting. He says, I don't see a thing in the world wrong with this fella. But you say you have a law. We have a custom here that at the Passover I release somebody to you. Who better for me to release to you on Passover according to our custom than the King of the Jews? See? Now he thought he was helping Jesus, but really that's the worst thing he could have said, because verse 40 says, then they all cried again, saying, not this man. If you're going to release somebody, release anybody but him. Release Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber. Barabbas was a thief. Barabbas was a criminal. Historically, Barabbas was probably a murderer. And they're saying, why don't you let him go instead of Jesus? That's how little sense sin makes. When did you say the bell rang? 15 to? 10 to? Okay, I might work it. So they do that. He goes out to try to release him. He meets with resistance, meets with violent resistance. And they say, no, don't you dare release him. We'll take Barabbas. So now he goes to have Jesus scourged. Now there's just really, 3 verses about this, 19 verses 1 through 3. But I want you to understand what scourging was, and you probably do, most of you. Scourging was more than a whipping. I used to get whippings. And whipping does not justify what we used to get. My mama believed in it. When we moved to that house in 1960, they planted 2 apple trees. One of the apple trees grew to be as tall as this ceiling. The other one was stunted and never got much above the bottom of that screen, because that was Mama's switch bush, and she would tear limbs off that thing and I'm talking limbs. She didn't believe in switches. It had to be substantial. And we thought she was going to kill us several times, but she never did. Well, she did once. We shook it off. That's nothing like scourging. A scourge, as you know, probably, they called it a cat of 9 tails. I decided when I was preaching at Munford I would demonstrate this. And so I got a bunch of twine. And see, these scourges, each of those 9 whips, individual whips, had bone and stone and metal embedded into it. So I tied rocks and everything screws and everything I could find at the end of those 9 individual pieces of twine. And it was a pretty decent scourge, I do think. And I came up here and I put a cardboard box right here. And I hadn't tested it out. I should have tested it first. But I reared back. That's a Greek term. I reared back and I hit that box. And when I hit the box, the whole side of that box disappeared. But now about half of those things bounced out into the crowd and hit the elders and the deacons. But, so I didn't hit it but once. One time. Tore right through that box like it was nothing. Can you imagine? Now these taskmasters, these scourgers, they were professionals. And they knew how to use those things. And they knew how to bring you just to the point of death and stop. Many times it's said that when a scourging was over, if you stood behind the man, you could see his lungs inflating and deflating, inflating and deflating, because all the muscles of his back had been torn away. Can you imagine what it was like to carry a cross like that? But Jesus carried it. And it wasn't his idea to stop and give it away. That was their idea. So Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. That's all it says. That's why I thought we needed a little background there. And the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. And some of these same soldiers are going to be standing there when he dies and the earth starts to quake and the darkness is there. And one of them's going to say, "Truly, this was the Son of God." And they're going to remember every time they hit him. So once the scourging is over, he goes back to the people. Now, Pilate still wants to let him go. Pilate is still trying to come up with some reason to let him go, some way to persuade them to let him go. And that's why after the scourging, and I want you to, now, the opinions about this movie are mixed, but The Passion of the Christ. And we went to see that movie. I don't know if you did or not. Some people didn't want to, and that's okay. It was hard to watch. And especially the scourging scene. And historians say that the scourging scene in the Passion of the Christ was probably the most accurate portrayal of a scourging that Hollywood has ever produced. And it was terrible. I mean, he was a bloody pulp. That's why Pilate wants to bring him back out. Because, see, he kind of thinks that if there's any humanity in this crowd, if anybody in this crowd has a heart, this should stir them to some type of sympathy. Doesn't work, though. Pilate then went out again and said to them, "Behold, I'm bringing him out to you, that you may know that," see, and now I'm going to say this. I'm inserting some words here, I'm sorry. But here's the implication. "Behold, I'm bringing him out to you, that you may know that even after I've done this to him," see, even after we did this, I still find no fault in him. So Jesus came out there before them, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, bleeding everywhere. It's amazing he could stand up. And it says, "Behold the man." See, that's usually the way we read that. "Behold the man." Here's what he said. He said, "Look at him." See? Look at him. You think that this man is a threat to you? He sat there and let us do this to him? I mean, are you so set on killing him that there's no way that you can feel sorry for him? And they said, "Kill him." That's what crucify means. Kill him. I mean, we see what you've done to him. Oh, that looks bad, yeah, but that's not enough. That's how much they hated him. It's amazing how deeply religious people can hate you. I talked to a girl one time when I was preaching somewhere, I won't tell you where, about divorce and remarriage. Oh boy. I know exactly why God says I hate divorce. I hate it too. All I did with this girl was told her what the Bible said. She got so mad. She stormed out of the building. She called me up at midnight. Said, "You sorry excuse for a preacher? I'll see you in hell and laugh in your face." Did that several times. All I did was read a few verses to her. They weren't my words. They were God's. But see, she wanted to be a Christian. That's why she was so mad. She said, "I was standing in the door of the church." That's happened to me in the last 45 years. That's happened about 3 or 4 times. I have people everywhere I've ever preached that literally hate me. And it's all 4 of those times, it was over marriage situations. He said, "You take him and crucify him. If you want him dead, you kill him. Because I don't find any fault with him." And they said, "Well, tell you what. We have a law that means he needs to die because he made himself the Son of God." Now that got Pilate's attention. It's interesting that the next phrase says, "Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid." So he moves again. He goes somewhere else. He goes back to Jesus. And he went again into the praetorium. Now, what's he afraid of? Well, it's not recorded here. But in Matthew 27:19, his wife sends him a message and says, "Don't you have anything to do with this man? I want you to watch this." It doesn't say, "Because I was sleeping and had a dream." It said, "I've been troubled by many things in a dream this day." I'm not sure she didn't have a vision in the middle of the day about Jesus. She has sent word to Pilate saying, "Don't you have anything to do with this man. Something is going on here." Because these equestrians, these middle-class people, though, that's just rude, though they were not religious, they were very superstitious. And when the crowd says now, "He's the Son of God," though they didn't believe in the God of heaven, they believed in gods, little g gods. And this got Pilate to thinking that he might be messing with some being that is not just normal. Now, he's right. But he thinks he might be messing with one who might strike him with a lightning bolt or something. So he goes back and says, "Where are you from? Where are you from?" See, you ever heard of Mount Olympus? The home of the Roman gods, Greek gods, which said? Where are you from? Are you from that mountain where Zeus lives? Who are you? And Jesus didn't answer him. And he said, "I can't believe you're not speaking to me. Don't you know I can have you killed, or I can let you go?" And Jesus says, "Don't you kid yourself. You're not in charge. God is. Don't you kid yourself. You're not in charge. God is." That's advice I always need. That's advice we could all use. So from then on, Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, "If you let this man go, you are not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. Okay, so now they're going to play that card. So when Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus out and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was preparation day of the Passover. And about the 6th hour, and he said to the Jews, Behold your king. And they cried, Away with him, away with him. Pilate said, Shall I crucify your king? And the chief priest, the rulers of religion, see, some of the most influential men in Jewish society said, We have no king but Caesar. These same men hated Matthew because he was a publican who took up money for the Roman government. But here they are claiming Caesar as king right out in the middle in front of God and everybody. See, again, that's what hypocrites you can be. So as the other passages say, he came out with that feeble attempt at justifying himself and washed his hands and said, I'm free from the blood of this man. And they said, Let his blood be upon us and on our children. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say, I bet you, but I bet you that the Jews have regretted that statement down through the years thousands of times. Then he delivered him to be crucified, and they took Jesus and led him away. Thank you very much, and I'll stop there. I didn't even drink my water.